If we take the height of Mount Everest, we would still have about a mile of water above us before we get to the ocean's surface. Spend a lot of time and effort developing submarine hunting technology. 7 miles down at the lowest point on the entire planet. A camera light cuts through water that has never once seen the sun, and something drifts into the frame. It should not be there. Nothing that size, that intact, that alive, is supposed to survive where the pressure could crush steel in a heartbeat. But there it is, moving calmly across the bottom of the world. And the moment the footage reaches the surface, the people who study this place go quiet and start pulling apart everything they thought they knew. So what exactly did that camera catch down there in the dark? 4 hours on the bottom. I think the longest anyone's ever been on the bottom of the Challenger Deep. The descent. The year is 2019 and Victor Visco is sitting inside a specially built submersible beginning his descent toward Earth's deepest scar. The Mariana Trench. I need you to understand that this is not just a dive. This is like climbing into a sealed metal sphere and lowering yourself on purpose into a zone of death. At first, everything feels almost ordinary. The water outside the window is bright, the kind of blue you would see on any normal day at sea. But as the submersible sinks, the light starts to drain away. Within minutes, a thick darkness closes in so completely that you could press your own hand against the glass and not see it. There is only the low hum of the machines keeping you alive and one human being alone going down. The descent lasts nearly 4 hours. 4 hours of sinking through black water. I went through pretty much all of my electrical power and had to be swapping batteries around and circuits around. It was a great journey. And with every meter, the pressure climbs higher, building towards something the human mind cannot really picture. By the time the sub reaches the bottom, the pressure crosses over 16,000 pounds per square inch. Sit with that number for a moment because it is not an abstraction. It means that if a single seal fails, if the engineering makes one small mistake, a human body would not be injured. It would be gone, not in minutes, in a second. And the silence does something to a person. Up on the surface there is always some sound. Wind, waves, the creak of a hull. Down here there is nothing but the machine and the slow-growing awareness that every meter of water above you is one more wall between you and the world you came from. There is no rescue at this depth. No team can follow you down. If something goes wrong at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, you are on your own in a way almost no human has ever been. At 35,853 feet, the sub finally settles onto the ocean floor, and this is not just a record being set. This is the exact moment humanity touches the lowest point it can reach on its own planet. And think about the kind of person who chooses this. Vesco is not being sent down by anyone. There is no order, no rescue plan, no safety net waiting in the dark. He climbed into that sphere knowing that the deepest part of the ocean has killed almost everyone foolish enough to underestimate it. And he went anyway because he understood something most of us forget. We have mapped Mars in finer detail than the floor of our own ocean. The deepest place on Earth was still in 2019 more of a blank than the surface of the moon. Then the lights come on and the camera starts to record a world apart. To understand why what that camera caught was so disturbing, you first have to understand the place it was filming. Because this is not a normal trench. This is a subduction zone where the Pacific tectonic plate is slowly grinding downward beneath the Mariana plate. A process that has been pulling this wound open in the Earth's crust for millions of years. Here is the simplest way I can make you feel how deep it goes. Take Mount Everest, the tallest mountain on the planet, and drop the whole thing into this trench. Its peak, the highest point on the surface of the Earth, would still sit almost a mile underwater. You would have a full mile of ocean above the summit before you ever reach the air. That is the scale we are talking about. The pressure at the bottom is beyond 1,000 atmospheres. Roughly 1,000 times the weight of the air you are sitting under right now, pressing on every inch of everything down there at once. And the cold is just as relentless, hovering barely above freezing. But the part that gets under my skin is the darkness. Sunlight gives out at around 3,300 feet, and the bottom of this trench is nearly 10 times deeper than that. Great Big Bang, we didn't know what it was. We're about 20,000 feet, and we looked around and checked everything. So think about what that actually means. For billions of years, not one ray of light has ever reached the floor of this place. It is so completely black down there that it makes no difference whether your eyes are open or closed. You would see exactly the same nothing. And where there is no light, there are no plants. Where there are no plants, nothing is making food. Whatever scraps of nourishment exist have to drift down from far above. Dead things sinking slowly through the dark, sometimes taking days to reach the bottom. Picture it. A fish dies near the surface, miles up, and its body begins a slow, silent fall, drifting down through layer after layer of darkening water. Until days later, what is left of it finally touches a floor that has never once seen the sun. That is the food supply. That is the whole menu. Crushing weight, freezing cold, total blackness, and a few crumbs raining down from a world the bottom will never see. Look at that list and the conclusion seems obvious. Nothing could live down there. Nothing should be able to. We were so sure of that we named the place after the underworld. Scientists call this layer the Hodl Zone after Hades, the ancient realm of the dead. We labeled it the land of the dead before we had ever properly looked. The old belief. For most of human history, the smartest people alive agreed completely. The deep ocean was empty. In the 1800s, when scientists first tried to drag samples up from the deep sea, their equipment kept coming back with nothing. Sometimes a little mud, sometimes cold sediment, but no proof of anything complex living down there. And every empty net only hardened the belief. The deep, they decided, was a barren zone, a dark drowned desert with nothing in it. Then in 1960, something happened that should have shaken that idea loose. A submersible called the Ba-Iskaf Trieste carried two men, Don Walsh and Jacques Picard, all the way down to Challenger Deep, the very point Vesco would reach decades later. And they came back saying they had seen living creatures on the bottom. But the technology of the time was painfully limited. The cameras could not capture clear footage. The visibility was terrible. So what they witnessed could not be proven, and the doubt simply swallowed it. For years afterward, the scientific world held the line. Life at these depths, they maintained, basically does not exist. In everyone's mind, there was still just one image of the deepest ocean, a silent, lightless desert with nothing moving in it. But what if every one of them was wrong? What if the only thing ever missing was a way to actually see? Before we follow that camera down to the bottom, do me one quick favor and hit subscribe. Because what those lights revealed is about to sound far more like science fiction than anything real, and you are going to want to be here for it. Now, let's keep going down. Technology changes everything. After 1970, the tools finally started to catch up. And the moment they did, the old certainty began to crack. Remotely operated vehicles appeared. Machines lowered on cables and steered from the surface. Stronger submersibles arrived, built to take the pressure, carry cameras, and haul samples back up. If the inner window had cracked, we would have been instantly dead, maybe even before we knew it. One by one, these devices crept down into the deep, and the clues they brought back kept whispering that the story was wrong. Then came 1977, and a discovery that hit the world of science like a thunderclap. On the deep ocean floor, researchers found hydrothermal vents, places where superheated mineral-rich water pours up out of the crust like underwater volcanoes. But the vents were not the shocking part. The shocking part was what was living around them. Entire communities of creatures growing, feeding, breeding, locked into a full food chain, and all of it thriving in absolute darkness without a trace of sunlight. That is where a strange new idea forced its way in, chemosynthesis. It turns out some organisms do not need the sun at all. They build their energy straight out of chemicals, which meant life could exist in a place light had never touched. It rewrote the rules, and it should have been a warning. Every time we had drawn a hard line and said life cannot cross this, the ocean had quietly crossed it already and was waiting for us to catch up. We just had not learned to read the warning yet, but one enormous question stayed buried in the dark. Every one of these discoveries was happening at depths of around 20,000 to 25,000 feet. Deep, yes, but not the deepest. What lived even further down in the Hodl Zone, the true bottom of the trenches, was still a complete blank. The technology could not reach that far yet. The very deepest part of the world stayed sealed away, holding whatever it was holding. And then a man decided he was going to go down there and look for himself. The 2019 mission. In 2019, Victor Visco launched the 5 Deeps expedition with one staggering goal. He wanted to touch the deepest point of every ocean on Earth, and the hardest, the one that had beaten almost everyone before him, was Challenger Deep. This time the difference was not just nerve. Visco had a submersible called the DSV Limiting Factor, engineered specifically to take the full crushing force of the deepest ocean. Stronger and safer than anything that had gone before. And mounted on it was the thing that would change everything. A high-definition 4K camera system able to capture the smallest detail in the total darkness. He made dive after dive below 33,000 feet, and each one was a gamble with the entire ocean stacked overhead. Every descent meant 4 hours down, hours on the bottom, 4 hours back, all sealed inside a metal sphere with the weight of the world pressing in. And every time, the cameras rolled for hours, gathering footage of a place no eye had ever clearly seen. But Vesco was not the only one paying attention. Up on the support ship in the control room, the expedition's chief scientist was waiting for that footage. His name is Alan Jameson, a deep-sea biologist from Newcastle University who has spent his entire career studying the Hadal Zone, the very layer everyone else had written off as dead. When the recordings came up onto his screens, he did what a careful scientist does. He watched. He went back, he checked his expectations against what was actually moving across the frame. Throughout most of recorded history, men just assumed that beyond a certain level, the sea was pretty flat, pretty dead, fairly lifeless. Understand what that moment meant for a man like him. Jameson had spent years lowering robotic landers into these trenches, building the tools, defending the idea that the deep was worth studying at all, often against colleagues who treated the bottom of the ocean like a Victorian sideshow, a place you only ever visited to gawk at something weird. He had a careful evidence-built picture in his head of what should be down there and in what numbers. So when the screens lit up, he was not watching for entertainment. He was holding the footage up against everything he thought he knew and waiting to see whether it held. And what he saw did not match his expectations at all. Too much life. Every assumption pointed to one thing: even if something did survive down there, it would be rare. A stray organism here, another scattered far across an empty plain. The picture in everyone's head was a barren floor with almost nothing on it. Then the lights hit the bottom, and the screen filled with life. Not a lonely survivor clinging on. Not a single lucky creature. Life crowding the frame. Not scattered, not rare, everywhere. The first to arrive were amphipods, small shrimp-like animals. And the moment bait went into the water, they swarmed it. They came in such enormous numbers that under the camera light, they stopped looking like individual animals at all, and became a single moving cloud, a living haze churning through the black water toward the food. Imagine being the person watching that feed, expecting an empty grave, and instead seeing a feeding frenzy. For Jameson, this was not a vague surprise. He could count them. He could see the density, the speed, the sheer biomass packed into a place his entire field had described as nearly empty. And every one of those animals was a small contradiction of the textbook. Then the camera found the sea cucumbers, soft, strange shapes crawling unhurried across the mud, hunting for scraps exactly the way their cousins do in sunlit shallows. No panic, no struggle for breath. Nothing about them looked like creatures barely enduring a nightmare. They looked like residents going about an ordinary afternoon. And that ordinariness is the thing that should stop you. We expected at most life hanging on by a thread, tense and desperate and rare. What the camera actually showed was calm, routine. The unbothered movements of animals completely at home in a place we had decided was uninhabitable. That was the first crack in everything. These animals were not surviving the deep as some desperate last stand. They were living in it comfortably as if it were the most normal place on Earth. The dead desert that generations of scientists had drawn in their minds turned out to be a busy working neighborhood. The map was simply wrong. And now there was footage to prove it. Is it a little hole? Is it a big hole? What kind of feature is it down there? There's a whole lot of questions you get when you find this one spectacular reading. A hidden city. The abundance was only the first surprise. The deeper jolt came when Jameson looked closer and saw how varied that life actually was. This was not one hardy species scraping by alone. It was many different kinds of creature living side by side, as though an entire town had quietly assembled at the bottom of the world. Even among the amphipods, there were clearly different types, some thin, some bulky, some darting fast, while others hugged the seabed. The sea cucumbers were not all alike either. Some inched along, grazing the sediment, others moved their own way, each seeming to hold down a specific job in the system. Then came the worms and the isopods and other shapes that had barely ever been recorded this deep, all of them going about their business. And none of them were isolated. They were wired into each other. A complete food web was humming away down there in the dark. Scavengers worked the dead material drifting down. Filter feeders pulled nutrients straight from the water. Predators hunted the smaller animals around them. Every creature had a role, a place, a purpose. A system this organized, this balanced, in conditions this brutal, was something no one had been prepared to find. It wasn't survival, it was a society. And a society does not appear overnight. A food web layered like that with every niche filled takes a very long time to build. It means life did not just stumble into the trench and die. It settled there generation after generation, long enough to specialize and divide the labor and shape itself to the dark. Which raises a quiet, uncomfortable question. How long has this been going on right underneath us in the one place we never thought to check? Because if this is old, if these communities have been quietly running for thousands or even millions of years, then we are not looking at some fragile fluke clinging to the edge of existence. We are looking at one of the oldest, most stubborn experiments in survival on the planet. Carried out in the total secrecy. While everyone above assumed the lights were off and the rooms were empty, we were not studying a dead place that occasionally surprised us. We were ignoring a living world that had been there the whole time, wide awake. There was one last assumption still standing. Even if life was abundant, even if it was diverse, surely it would be slow, sluggish, half asleep in the cold and the dark, conserving every scrap of energy. That was the final reasonable guess. The footage tore it apart too. The amphipods were fast. The instant food appeared, they attacked it in a mob, shoving and competing, each one racing to grab as much as it could before the rest. This was not the twitch of animals running out of time. This was the behavior of confident, hungry predators that knew exactly what they were doing. And the fish moving through the same water were swimming smoothly, easily, in full control, exactly like fish in warm, shallow water near a beach. Their bodies were not slowing down. Their lives were not winding down. They were not enduring this place. They were thriving in it. Everything scientists had assumed about deep life pointed the other way. The logic seemed airtight. Less food and brutal cold should force any organism to throttle itself down to move as little as possible, to spend energy like a miser 1 calorie at a time. That was not a wild guess. It was sound biology, and the footage simply ignored it. These animals were behaving like they had energy to burn in a place that should have rationed every scrap of it. And that forces a strange flip in how you have to think about the whole trench. This environment is a death sentence for us. To the things that live there, it is just home. The most hostile place we know of on Earth is, to its residents, completely ordinary. Clearly, the ocean floor had enormous changes in relief, was very mountainous in some places, had great deeps in other places, built for the dark. So, how do they pull it off? How does anything live under a weight that would erase a human in a second? The answer is quieter and stranger than you would expect. Their bodies are mostly water, and water barely compresses. So the pressure inside them stays almost perfectly matched to the pressure outside. They are not bracing against the ocean. They are not holding it back. They are simply in balance with it. The same crushing force pushing in and pushing out canceling itself. The trench cannot crush them because there is nothing rigid inside for it to crush. The real trick is smaller down at the level of their cells. Their proteins are built to keep their shape under pressure that would warp ours. Their cell membranes hold special fats that stay flexible when they should turn stiff. Their enzymes keep working in the cold and the dark without slowing down. And here's the part that should unsettle you a little. They did not invent some alien biology to do this. They are running on the same basic machinery you and I are running on, just adjusted in a few precise places. Life does not need to become something else to conquer the impossible. It only needs to bend in the right spots. Which means the line between where life can exist and where it cannot is far blurrier than we ever wanted to admit. And if biology bends this easily to fit the deepest, darkest place on Earth, it raises the obvious next question. Just how far does it bend and how big can it get? Giants and shadows. This is where the story stops being merely amazing and starts crawling under your skin. Because the creatures down there were not just plentiful and energetic. They were too big. The amphipods were reaching 6 to 8 in long, many times the size of their relatives in the shallows. And then there was the animal that more than anything else on that footage deserves to be called the creature at the bottom of the ocean, the snailfish. 8 to 10 in long with a soft, faintly translucent jelly-like body. It drifted through the beam of the lights like something half-finished, pale and ghostly, almost glowing. You could nearly see through it. By every old rule, it should have been a flattened smear at that depth. Instead, it was whole, fully formed, fins intact, gliding through the most crushing water on the planet as calmly as a goldfish crossing a bowl. Stay on that image because it matters more than any shadow. This is not a beast with teeth. It is not a horror. It is a small, gentle, almost delicate thing. And that is exactly what makes it so unsettling. We could have braced ourselves for some armored monster built like a tank to take the pressure. Instead, the deepest fish on Earth looks fragile enough to fall apart in your hands. And yet, it lives somewhere that would crush a steel cylinder. We're not equipped to resist those kinds of pressures. And so, it's necessary to protect humans from that type of an environment. The creature that broke the rules did not look strong. It looked soft. That single gentle otherworldly animal filmed where nothing was ever supposed to live is the image that sent scientists back to recheck everything. But the fear does not come from what the camera clearly showed. It comes from what it could not. The lights only ever lit a small bubble of water. Beyond that edge, the dark was total. And again in the footage, the mud on the seafloor seemed to shift and stir as if something large had just moved through, though nothing clearly appeared on screen. In several shots, shapes drifted at the very rim of the light, some sliding, some vanishing. The instant the camera turned toward them. A few of them large enough that they did not match anything the expedition had filmed. You watch it and your eye keeps snapping to the corner of the frame, to that boundary where the light gives out and the black begins. Because that is where the movement always seems to be, just outside of proof. Now, I want to be honest with you, because this is exactly where these stories usually go off the rails. We don't have proof of a monster down there. We don't, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. Those shifting shadows could be silt or current or tricks of a single light source in absolute black. But here's what changed. For generations, anomalies like that, odd shapes, strange sonar returns that matched no known animal got waved away automatically, because everyone knew there was nothing alive down there to make them. That excuse is gone. Now that we have watched complex, fast, oversized life thriving on that floor, the easy dismissal does not hold anymore. So look at the geometry of the problem. The lights reveal a few meters. The Mariana Trench runs more than 1,500 meters along the seabed, a canyon longer than most countries, almost entirely unvisited. The footage we have, hundreds of hours of it, amounts to a handful of pinpricks of light scattered across an enormous lightless world. Anything that wanted to stay out of the beam could do it without trying. And if 8 to 10-inch creatures live down there in comfort, then where exactly is the ceiling? 1 foot 2, something we have not seen at all. Remember, the amphipods down there already grow several times larger than their shallow water cousins. Something about the deep does not shrink life. In at least some cases, it seems to make it bigger. So the question is not whether that scaling has a limit. The question is where and whether anything has ever been close enough to one of our few small lights to show us. The most frightening thought is not that we found something strange. It is the growing suspicion that we have not really seen the place yet. Wang in those days was kind of a backwater. It was just right for us because we were trying to do this project sort of out of sight because we weren't too sure it was going to work. The food problem. And there is a hole in this whole picture that nobody has filled. And it might be the most unsettling part of all. If the trench is this crowded, this active, this alive, then what on earth is feeding it? No sunlight reaches the bottom. So where is all the energy coming from? The first answer was marine snow. The slow drift of dead matter falling from far above. It is a tidy idea until you run the numbers. The amount of debris that actually reaches the bottom comes nowhere close to feeding a population this large and this busy. The food coming down and the life living down there do not balance. Something is missing. Maybe chemosynthesis is quietly at work. Bacteria building energy from chemicals the way they do at the vents. Except vents have not been found everywhere in this trench. So that cannot explain all of it. Maybe there are hidden energy sources we have simply never detected. Reactions happening in the dark we know nothing about. Or maybe, and this is the one that genuinely unsettles me, the deep ocean runs more efficiently than the sunlit world above it, recycling the same scraps of energy over and over until almost nothing is wasted, sustaining far more life on far less than should be possible. If that last one is true, the place we wrote off as a dead zone may be one of the most stable, efficient ecosystems on the entire planet. But the truth is, we do not know. We are staring at a thriving, packed world in crisp 4K, and we cannot fully explain what keeps it alive. There is a major piece of how the bottom of the ocean works that is still completely missing. And we are looking right at the evidence of it without being able to name it. Snorts are garbage found. There is one last thing the cameras found at the bottom of the world, and it is the one that should disturb us most. Because the place we believed was the most remote, untouched spot on Earth turned out to have a visitor already. Us. When Vesco's submersible reached the very floor of Challenger Deep, the deepest point on the planet, the lights picked out a plastic bag and a candy wrapper lying in the silt. 7 meters down, in the one place we were certain no human trace could ever reach. Our garbage was already waiting, having arrived long before we did. And it goes deeper than the seabed. When scientists examined the amphipods, those tough little survivors thriving in the most extreme conditions on Earth, they found microplastics inside their bodies. The pollution we pour into the surface had not just sunk to the bottom. It had worked its way inside the animals that live there. The most isolated ecosystem we know of is already carrying a piece of us inside it. Sit with the timeline of that. We did not even confirm this life existed until 2019, and by the time we finally saw it clearly, our waste was already inside it, woven into the bodies of creatures we had not so much as named. We reached the bottom of the world twice over. Once with a submarine, and long before that, without ever meaning to, with our trash. So hold the whole shape of this in your mind for a moment. For generations we called the deep ocean dead. And we were wrong. It is alive, crowded, fast and stranger than we guessed. We caught one pale, impossible creature drifting through water that should have destroyed it. And it sent the experts back to the start. We cannot explain what feeds that world. We have shadows at the edge of the light we cannot name. And the very first time we looked clearly, we found our own trash had beaten us there. Every single one of those facts was a surprise. Every one of them landed on people who were sure they already understood this place. That is what it actually means to recheck everything. Not to adjust one number, but to admit that the entire picture was built on an assumption that turned out to be false. The creature filmed at the bottom of the ocean made scientists recheck everything. But the harder truth is that we have barely seen this world at all. The footage we have is a single candle held up in a darkness that stretches for miles in every direction. And whatever else is down there, drifting just past the edge of the light, is still down there right now, this very second, as you sit and watch this. So something this alive was hiding in the one place we were sure was empty. What else have we gotten wrong? Tell me in the comments what you believe is still down there waiting in the dark. And if this changed the way you see the bottom of the ocean, even a little, subscribe and stay with the channel because we are only just getting started and the deep is a very big place.